Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. On this show, of course, you know we talk about family wellness, emotional health, and mental wellness, and our goal is to make sure that families have all the tools they need to be able to be as solid as they can in their own personal and emotional wellness and mental wellness. So today, we are talking about ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, which we know can have significant social impact on the lives of individuals who struggle with it. It can cause disruption at work, it can cause disruption at school, in relationships, and many people just report significantly reduced quality of life for their children, for their adolescents. And many people struggle with it well into adulthood as well. So we'll look at ADHD and provide helpful information today about what it looks like just along the developmental spectrum and in different settings. And then we'll talk about various treatment protocols and then some probably all natural supplements that can be helpful as well. Joining us in the studio today is play therapist Dr. Yolanda Fountain. How are you, Dr. Fountain? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm well.
Good. So just kind of talk to us a little bit about ADHD and just what it looks like. How does someone know? Because I hear so many people say, even in adulthood, that they hadn't really put that together, that the things that they struggled with were connected to ADHD, ADD. What does that look like?
Yes, there are so many smaller symptoms that can add up to the bigger category.
Mm-hmm.
It primarily impacts organization, attention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, in the diagnoses, there are three main categories.
Mm-hmm.
And so one is inattentiveness.
Yeah.
And that's the inability or struggle with paying attention, focusing.
And most people, when they think of that, they think of the child in school who's struggling to pay attention in school, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's most of the time what people think about.
And sometimes, though, it's harder to recognize the inattentiveness.
Mm-hmm.
People may think they're just shy or, tend to isolate. But a child with ADHD, primarily inattentive type, they can literally be staring at the teacher in their face and not hear a word that the teacher's saying.
That's severe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it could be, it definitely impacts listening skills. A lot of times, even with adults, I find myself like, you're not listening to me. And I just said that 4 times, and I told you it was important when I said it. And so what I have learned to do is to write it down.
Yeah.
So when they can see it, their visual stimuli, most of them are better able to interpret it, to understand and translate it to the auditory listening skills.
That's so interesting because even as you said that, right, I just said that to you 4 times. Did you not hear me? And I'm picturing in an adult relationship.
There's the question. This is eating at me. How do you know if that's purposely or ADHD?
Because
I get that.
And so we are not trying to say that every time somebody ignores you that they have ADHD.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fine intuition. It could be both. Generally, when somebody's just ignoring you.
Yes.
I grew up with a lot of family members who have ADHD, so when it becomes a repeated pattern over and over and there is no intentionality behind it that's negative, then you say, this is very frustrating for me. Like, what is going on here? I just told you. Oh my God. When you kept looking at me, I was like, well, I'm not sure yet. We'll keep paying attention in the show.
Lord. Okay, Dr. Sutherland. I got the other side today. Okay.
So another one with the inattentive type is difficulty organizing tasks. You'll see that where there's a lack of priority. This is important, or I might get distracted. Sometimes they multitask. It might be like 4 or 5 tasks, which can be a benefit for them if they actually complete 2 or the 3. Or multi-skip directions. That's huge for parents that I work with. they expect their child, they do this every morning, 365 days a year. You think they know to get up, brush their teeth, put on their clothes, all that sequential orders things.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times it helps if they have a visual, check box of do this. Okay, I did that. I brushed my teeth. I took my shower. I put on my clothes.
Yeah.
I put on my shoes. I got my book bag.
That detailed, and it needs to be that detailed.
Correct.
Yeah, and
Yes.
even as you describe that, the checklist, just the every little step, one after the order in sequence. When you think about children with ADHD who are unable to put those steps together and don't have a prompt like that, just the mental health pieces then that follow around depression and self-worth, thoughts about their self-worth, things like that, this kind of tank and then compound upon ADHD symptomology, right? And then, of course, if they have the checklist, just how much empowerment that gives them. Yeah.
Because it can be a very, from their perspective, it can be quite critical.
Yeah.
Children already go through their day with tons of directives. And then to know that you're hearing even more because you can't remember to do the things you're expected to do, in a multi-step pattern, then of course, yes, that can impact. We see a lot of duality with the self-esteem being impacted just as well because they feel like they're disappointing someone all the time because they literally cannot handle it in their frontal brain, those executive functioning skills.
Yes. Yeah. And I can just hear children's thoughts as, that follow this. I'm stupid, right? I can't do anything. What's the matter with me? All of that then begins to pop up on a regular basis. And then we're looking at depression.
It definitely can.
Yeah.
The inattentive type is just one of the types. Now, there is a combined inattentive and hyperactive. And so that's when you have, for children, 6 or more of the symptoms in inattentive and 6 or more of the symptoms in hyperactivity. You can classify which one or both. For adults, you only need 5.
Okay.
So for the hyperactivity,
Yeah.
this is the one that frustrates the school teachers the most.
Okay.
They're all over the place. They won't sit in their seats when they're instructed to. It could also be not following or feel like not following directions. They fidget a lot, always moving some of their hands or in their seats, moving around. And so for the teachers, it feels like they're sometimes being disrespectful because they're not following the instructions. And so a part of that developmentally is really paying attention to how much of this is developmental. Like kids naturally need, they move to explore. All of that movement helps their brain development.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a challenge, especially when the school system is so focused on you sit here for 8 hours and don't move. Most adults can't do that.
I could do that.
You know what? You're a different one. Never mind. You know what? You're the exception. And I applaud you for that.
My nose is
If I had that skill, I would, go to Disneyland and be one of those statues in silver.
Oh my gosh. So talk a little bit more about how all that movement helps with brain development.
Well, there are so many benefits of physical activity play, period.
Yes.
With kids, the U.S. Health and Human Services Department, they publish this study every so often, and they said that kids under the age of 5 need at least, I think it was 3 hours, 3 to 5 hours of movement, of vigorous movement per day. Wow. Yes, because it's directly correlated to helping with their brain development in all areas. To get that, because when they explore, they're learning, and those neurons are firing. And so you have to pay attention to see what's the difference between when a child is literally growing in brain development, and this is, of course, an ongoing process,
Sure.
Versus when it's becoming an inability to function in different areas of homework, school life.
That's real interesting that you say that that movement is needed, and I'm curious as to see or to know whether or not ADHD kind of picked up once recess was taken out of schools, because you know, that was, you know, big, at least back when I was in school. You know, you had that period to just recess, to go outside, release that energy, come back in, and get back to work. Whereas now, there's no recess. A lot of the schools aren't even doing gym.
Really?
You know, yeah.
Wow.
That was actually a school out in Texas who did a study. They put in 4 15 to 30-minute recesses and saw the academic improvement accelerate. And it is unfortunate because when I was in elementary school, we had periods of naps. We had periods of play. And we actually just, a colleague and I wrote an article on going playing, like advocating for play in the school setting. Because that is the problem, especially with kids with ADHD. They have so much brain stimulation, and they don't have any physical way to get that out. And so some of even I help parents advocate if they need to get the 504 plans or IEPs in the school, so that they can put in activity breaks or, you know, physical activity or play breaks, so that the kids, actually it helps them focus more. If I can pay attention, you know, do this work for 15 to 30 minutes and then get up and go jump in the corner, I'm resetting my brain so that I can focus some more for these next 15 to 30 minutes.
Yeah. That's huge. That's huge. And I think people don't really realize that. Right. When kids used to come home after school and go outside and play, before coming in to do homework, just go outside and play and get that out. But traditionally what we do now is do your homework first.
Yes.
Come home from school, do your homework first. And then you can go play as a reward. Versus the play being a natural part of
the development, the focusing, the attention.
Yeah, that can be a game changer for parents. Using play as a reward, but not kind of looking at it that way, but as a part of their natural development and a need that they have.
Yeah, I will say the other major symptom of the hyperactivity sometimes is the auditory sound. I get a lot of kids who come in the office and they will pick the loudest instruments they can find and just play it. You know, and for me, I have to model, self-protection. I cover my ears and I show them, you know what, while you need that input, that's very loud for me. So I'm going to protect myself by allowing you the input that you need. Sometimes they're hyperverbal too, or, you know, they talk. And you'll see this sometimes in adults, and, you know, it is what it is, but they can also, on the opposite side of that, be natural, socialized individuals who know how to hold conversations with people and then are very engaging. So, I don't like to see everything as also a challenge.
And everything shouldn't be pathologized.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
I actually had one of my supervisees who identified as ADHD with the diagnosis, and she shared it shouldn't be attention deficit. It should be like an overstimulation or overactivity, because the deficit comes in the lack of functioning. But other than that, it's more than enough. More than the average person.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got the inattentive type, and we've got the hyperactivity type,
and then the combined type.
So tell us about the combined type.
It's all that we just talked about put together.
And Jesus.
And let's see, y'all energy just went all the way down. It can be very fun.
That's why you are the play therapist.
Well,
the rest of us.
I was born to do this, so you're right. Yeah, it can be more challenging though, because I always with kids who come into my office who are diagnosed with ADHD, I have to make sure to leave time after the session because cleanup is crazy. And so, especially during the assessment, I don't have them clean up. But after, when we get into treatment, then I actually integrate games to help them with memory, organization. So we do some game cleanup stuff, but it's also dually helping them with their executive functioning skills. So.
What about impulsivity?
Ooh, that's right. Impulsivity. So impulsivity is when you act before you think about what that may mean, all the consequences, whether positive or negative of what that means. And so impulsivity in its best looks like risk-taking behaviors that pay off well. Impulsivity in its worst looks like you have damaged yourself and some relationships, over your decision making.
Yeah.
So yes, then that's a executive functioning skill in the frontal lobe, and so a lot of times we have games. Play therapy can help teach impulse control, using limit setting too. It's one of those things where it's also developmental. Your frontal lobe doesn't fully develop. Most research say
That's
21
right.
to 28.
That's right.
So
There's a lot of people walking around
A whole lot.
control.
A whole lot.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why you're not supposed to technically drink in this country to 21 in some areas. So, because your brain is still growing. And,
Yeah. All right, well, we'll talk some more about that. We're going to take a break.
all right.
When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what this looks like just within relationships. We'll talk a little bit about what it looks like as folks go through teenage years and adulthood, and just so that folks can kind of get a sense of this is what it looks like when we talk about it kind of in clinical speak, so to speak, but nuts and bolts, what am I looking at day to day in addition to what we just talked about. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. So we're talking about ADHD today, and I wanted to just introduce our guests a little bit more. So Dr. Fountain, just tell us a little bit about the work that you do in the field, and then when you're done, we'll introduce Dr. Tracy Gibbs, who's joining us on the line as well, who's the Chief Scientific Advisor for VASAYO. So Dr. Fountain, tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Yes. So I own a private practice called Play Wellness in Roswell, Georgia. And we provide intergenerational care. So actually from parents who are pregnant all the way to geriatric services. We promote playing throughout development to enhance the mental health. And we also provide supervision and training to clinicians who are trying to become professional counselors, social workers, and registered play therapists and supervisors.
Awesome. How long have you been in Roswell?
We have been in Roswell about 2.5 years now. We started in Dunwoody doing the supervision and training for clinicians, and then moved there.
Okay. And so how much of your practice do you see ADHD just across the spectrum, do you think?
Maybe about 25%. I used to work in a psychologist's office where it was nearly 100%. And so we have a good mixture now since we see a variety of age ranges as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And also joining us on the phone is Dr. Tracy Gibbs, who's the Chief Scientific Advisor for VASAYO. Welcome, Dr. Gibbs.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome.
I'm actually having difficulty hearing both of you.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a different type of connection we can use, or
We'll get the technician to work on
I can
that.
barely hear you.
Okay, so we'll get the technician to work on that, and then once that fixes, we'll
right.
circle back so you can kind of hear. Or if you can hear this question and while they're working on it, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do at VASAYO and just introduce your history?
Yeah, sure. As the Chief Scientific Advisor of VASAYO, it's my responsibility to oversee the formulation and development of all of the products at VASAYO. We have very unique delivery technologies that we use, cutting edge in the nutraceutical industry, mainly around the field of liposome technology, which has been used by Big Pharma for many years in delivering drugs directly to the cells, and we use that technology to deliver beneficial nutrients directly to the cells. I also oversee the Scientific Advisory Board. We have a great team of medical doctors spread throughout the country that help in educating our customers regarding the products And my history in this industry is extensive. I've been formulating dietary supplements since 1994, so for 24, 25 years now. I own a patent on an advanced delivery technology, and I've literally formulated over 1,000 products for hundreds of companies in many countries around the world.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm excited later on in the show to hear a little bit more just about some of the products that could be helpful as supplements for ADHD, people struggling with ADHD. So I guess what I want to go to now is just sometimes people want to know, well, why did ADHD pop up? Well, what is that? Where does that come from? That's such a huge question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because the cause is not necessarily totally understood.
Yeah.
There are certain factors that may play more than others. So heredity. It's in my family, and some family members birth ADHD. And so if your mom or dad had it, then there's a chance that you could also develop it, and maybe some of that is environmental as well.
Mm-hmm.
The neurological, definitely. So there's some research that shows there's some different brain patterns, and developmental problems. I think one research study said that if the mother smoked during pregnancy, it could lead to increased risks of inattentiveness and hyperactivity.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Gibbs, do you have any thoughts on just how ADHD?
I do, and I don't mean to be ultra controversial or not, but I completely understand that ADD is a huge problem. But I believe that the problem is more epigenetic than genetic. I know a lot of people use that term genetic disorders openly without fully understanding the difference between epigenetic and genetic. Genetic is that when you're born, you're going to have 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose and a mouth, and you're going to be human and not a fish if you come from 2 humans. Epigenetic disorders are environmental disorders that are, I guess you could say, based on your environment, your nutritional habits, your parents or even ancestors may develop genetic weaknesses over time based on their environment. And so they can pass those weaknesses on to you, but that does not mean that you have to get that disease. You can overcome that by changing your environment. And I believe ADD and ADHD is an epigenetic disorder more than a genetic disorder, simply because I've been involved actually in a couple of clinical studies back in 1998 and 1999 where we simply hydrated children properly and gave them proper nutrients, and literally within a matter of days many of their symptoms went away. So in my mind it may not even be epigenetic, because epigenetics usually takes a whole lifetime to overcome those weaknesses. It may be simply many people are misdiagnosed because there really is no blood test or solid test to test for ADD. It may just be, hey, you've got these symptoms, so I'm going to label you ADD. And many children may be misdiagnosed with it when actually they just have nutritional deficiencies.
That makes sense.
And I can certainly agree with that. In addition to that, I think it could be both. But if it's truly ADHD, but it's also overdiagnosed.
Yeah.
Sometimes by people who aren't qualified in the mental health field. And additionally, a lot of times, even what I've seen is it's misdiagnosed, sometimes with PTSD. And so I have to really do a careful screening when I'm assessing, because children can't always articulate verbally, because that's a higher level of brain processing what has happened to them.
Right.
And so that's why we use the play to kind of see, they teach us through their play what their behaviors are. And so we have to be very careful to make sure we screen out that there's PTSD, because those symptoms can look similar.
Yeah. So talk about them, the similarities between PTSD and ADHD, just so that listeners that don't have any background in this can kind of get a sense of what that might be.
So a huge one could be distraction. If I'm in school and there's trauma or previous abuse that has occurred to me, I can't focus because I might be worried about my safety, or I'm thinking about what has happened to me in the past or currently.
That's right. That's right. I could be re-experiencing even in the moment, and not be caught. So that just speaks to the need for parents and families really to be connected with mental health providers who can help them screen those type of things out, so they kind of know what they're looking for. Yeah. And I would even say that some of the research says that ADHD is even at a higher proportion misdiagnosed in minority communities as well. Yeah. Something to think about. So that's kind of the causes, or at least thoughts around the causes of ADHD, right? So when we think about how this looks along the developmental spectrum, let's talk about it in adulthood some, because in adults, it looks a little bit different and the same, but I have a friend who is doing the PhD, and ADHD is a major thing for her. And, she's at the point where she's finished, final dissertation piece, and just the stress of having to focus so long and so hard on the same material to get that thing pushed out. It's huge. It's huge.
I have several friends who are stuck in their dissertation with a diagnosis of ADHD.
Yeah.
Wow.
Several. And it's really sad because they've gotten over the hump, but the dissertation is the piece that is the most challenging.
Yes.
And so it's some of the stuck areas of, like, for example, they may pay attention to one thing and isolate and zone on that and disregard this bigger picture of everything else that needs to be done. With there's other things, so like maybe missing deadlines, time management. This is particularly at work. If they're married, sometimes if their partner depended on them to do something, they make a careless mistake and it can mess up the whole thing that was the purpose. So they may select the wrong date for a plane ticket, but book the ticket.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, one of my parents may or may not acknowledge having ADHD, but dragging me through malls. Like, we would go to 5 to 6 miles a day, and I'm just dragging, like I'm worn out. So sometimes they can not recognize how they can tire out the people around them with their hyperactivity.
Dr. Gibbs, what have you seen that it looks like in adulthood?
Yeah, I think that's the time, late teens and early adulthood, when you can really distinguish and differentiate what truly is ADD or ADHD or what has been misdiagnosed as a child, because like you mentioned earlier, you are able to articulate yourself a little bit better. You can realize that, oh my gosh, why do I have so much trouble focusing on something? And, I've seen it in some teens that I know that are finishing their, high school exams. And that's when we really start to recognize, oh my goodness, maybe you do have ADD. So let's get some help and let's see how we can take care of this. When many times as children, I'll tell you what, when I first looked at these symptoms, I have 3 boys that I raised as a single father for quite some time, for about 12 years. And when I looked at the symptoms of ADD, I was thinking, boy, these are my boys. But when you look at it, these are all boys. Everybody has a lack of attention or hyperactivity or lack of focus, when you're a 5-year-old child. But if that continues to be a problem into late teens and adulthood, then you really know that, hey, something is messed up in the brain here. Certain things aren't firing properly. And I think it's quite widespread. And again, another opinion, this is merely an opinion of mine. I seem to see that people with ADD and ADHD just love social media because it keeps their brains focused on something, because social media especially is so dynamic and changing every so often, and it matches exactly what their brains want. They can focus on something for 3 to 5 seconds, and then something new pops up, and then something new pops up again, and something new pops up again, and it actually makes them feel normal watching social media. Then having to take a high school or college exam or dissertation, as you were mentioning, where they have to focus for hours on one topic, which is impossible for someone with ADHD or ADD to do. So anyway, it really does express itself in adulthood, and I think it's much more easier to diagnose in adults than it is in children, or accurately diagnose, I should say.
Yeah.
But it's more widespread, I believe, I think, than we actually believe it is. You know, I'm not going to shoot out any percentages of the population because we don't have that data, but it's definitely out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I concur with that, especially because that's why I'm very slow, even with some psychological reports with the ADHD diagnosis, because a lot of times you don't know if that's just developmental or not. And so that's kind of the challenge and or irony of it, because even if it is, when they get to teenager and adulthood, because of the previous experience we talked about where they've been shamed or, you know, corrected so much that their self-esteem is impacted, now you're looking at maybe comorbidity like depression or anxiety and all the other things that can go with it.
Yeah.
And then the irony is that a lot of adults who actually may have these presenting symptoms enough for a diagnosis may not even know it.
Yes.
And so the children who don't have it are being diagnosed, and the adults who do aren't.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that. But how can you be in adulthood and not know something's wrong?
They've become functional. You had a functional alcoholic?
Yes.
It's like a functional ADHD.
Yes.
They figured out ways to manage it as best they can.
Yeah.
I think, you know, if that's all you've known your entire life, that's all you know, and you don't know what you don't know. So I think there's a lot of people that aren't aware that they have an issue because that's all they've known and that's all the people around them have ever known. And to their friends, they just might, hey, this person just has trouble focusing. They might even think it's funny in some cases, you know, use it as a joke or something. But unless you're professionally trained or actually come across or talk to somebody who's a professional in this arena, you may never know that you suffer from ADHD.
And do you see in adults struggling with ADHD that same level of impulsivity? And I guess when I asked that question, and we talked a little bit earlier just about that, making sure to flesh out, are we really looking at ADHD? Are we looking at some type of PTSD? And when we think about PTSD and impulsivity that can sometimes come out of the trauma that's untreated over time, right? Then even in adulthood, that can be a fleshing out, a need for, and that becomes even more complex by that time, I would imagine.
I think in adulthood, as we mentioned earlier, it can be a little bit easier to clarify which is which, because now the adults, even though they may not be able to process it as well with their left brain, verbally speaking, they sometimes can at least allude to figure out what happened then. And that's why, because we also use sand tray therapy to help adults in a nonverbal way to get out those overwhelming feelings. And so I think it can be clarified, but yes, to your original question, adults can be just as impulsive with the ADHD diagnosis. They, one experience is, you know, if you're having a disagreement, they overtalk you. They may, you know, blurt out things that they didn't think about before they said and really harm the relationship.
Take it back.
And then want to take it back.
I didn't mean to say that. And they really didn't mean to say that. It just blurted out.
Maybe.
Completely different show. Wait a minute. I was going to try to stay quiet on that.
I tend to keep it real.
They wanted to say it.
Well, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the person truly struggling with impulsivity due to ADHD.
And as a person in relationship with it, they can only tolerate that for so long. A lot of times. Sure. Before that, and that's when the impulse control comes in, because there has to be consequences a lot of times when you're an adult, and these things repeat themselves, and now you're having relational functional issues.
And so the ability of adults to really recognize patterns in their lives, and this is a struggle for some people, to really recognize patterns of relationship in their lives and how they are contributing to and how people are reacting to them over and over and over again while they're in relationship, but not really catching, well, what's really going on here? Right?
Yeah.
That can be very difficult.
Yeah, and I would like to point out, one of the things that can really help people in a relationship where one of them has ADHD or ADD is you need to understand the problem and get rid of the myths or the lies about ADHD. There are so many people that believe that let's say you're dealing with a spouse who suffers from ADD, and I've seen people make this mistake all the time where they just think that their spouse has no willpower or no motivation. And it really makes the relationship difficult because they're lacking the basic understanding that this is a chemical problem in the brain. It's not that the person's lazy or lacks willpower or just, I don't know, isn't motivated to accomplish or finish tasks or projects or things like that. If you can understand that it's a brain chemical problem, your empathy and your love for that person will grow versus the opposite. If you think they're lazy or they lack willpower, you actually build up animosity towards them, and that can really hurt a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so now we're really talking about education, right? And people having access to education around these types of things. Once they get to the point where they actually recognize that this is what's going on, all right? Recognizing it is probably just the first most difficult step. And then from there, getting education about, now that I recognize this, how is this really impacting and in what areas, right? We're talking about relationship, but how is this impacting me at work, and how does it make some of the things that happen at work make sense? Whereas before, I couldn't really make sense of it. I just knew that this is how I was, right?
So I guess my thing is, someone from the outside looking in, what would be the first steps for, I understand with children, we take them to the doctor and we say, okay, we think something's going on, we don't know. As an adult, what are the first steps an adult should do in order to get either diagnosed or figure out whatever else is going on with you? If you've got all these things going on, help our listeners understand the process of that before they even get to the full education of it,
So with treatment, it can look like the person going to counseling. They can get psychological testing specifically for ADHD or other stuff to see if it's some other diagnoses mixed in with that. Typically from there, the helpful thing would be to, look at the brain chemistry. So even going to a psychiatrist or naturopathic doctor, or I'm trying to think of the word, neurofeedback, all those things to help also recognize nutrition. So what you're putting in your body that may be impacting these chemicals. Oh, I thought he was. And so hopefully it's a holistic thing that one treatment provider can help you look at all areas in your life that may be impacting that.
Yeah. Dr. Gibbs, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I truly believe in the holistic approach. First and foremost, as an adult, it's really difficult to admit that you have an issue. I hope people can humble themselves, and if they've got 3 or 4 friends and maybe even the spouse saying, hey, you need to go get some help, please go see a psychiatrist. But don't rely on that person's opinions and diagnoses alone, because there are many psychiatrists out there who the first thing they do is, hey, let's get you on a prescription to help with this. And then, to me, prescription drugs should be the last resort. When you have tried nutrition, when you have tried, mental exercises and things like that, and it's still just not working, heck yes, a prescription drug can be hugely beneficial. But again, every prescription drug comes with side effects. Yeah. Everybody should know that. And those side effects may not be immediate. They could be long-term, but they're there. And so that should be the last resort. But a holistic approach, I completely agree with. You know, like I said, I was involved in 2 studies, one in 1998, one in 1999. One was simply on hydration. Believe it or not, there is a naturopathic doctor here in Salt Lake City, a pediatrician named Dr. Cynthia Kaur, who did this clinical study on her. These were teenage, high school age students in one of the school districts here. And all she did was give them 16 ounces of water per day. That's it. That was just her whole study. There was no ADD medication or anything. In fact, she actually took them off the medication, put them on 16 ounces of water a day, and it was incredible. It was like 72% of the teenagers' expressions of ADD were reduced or eliminated. Can you believe that? Just with proper hydration. And when you think about it, our kids don't drink water very much, right? It's soda pop and punch or juice or whatever. How often do we drink water?
Yeah.
But I believe in the holistic approach. I believe in looking at what you're eating every day and making sure you're getting your vegetables and your fruits and not all processed foods. Even adults have trouble with this. You know, I could ask both of you right now, hey, here it is, you know, coming up on midday. How many servings of vegetables and fruits have you had today versus processed food? It's a problem we all suffer from, you know?
Yeah.
And to concur with that, definitely, even the parents who come into my office, I go stripped down to the basics, the physiological needs. How much sleep is your child getting?
Yes.
Because you'll be surprised how limited amount of sleep the kids are actually getting, and restful sleep, even if they're just in the bed.
Right,
you know,
right.
how much restful sleep are they getting? Because sleep, if you don't have sleep, you'll have all these symptoms.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
naturally.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sleep, the nutrition as he mentioned, and then the activity and hydration.
Yeah.
So those basic things that we need as humans to function. I think we're so swept up with so many other things we forget about that.
Yeah.
Right. The connection I'm trying to make here, and this is what a lot of doctors who scoff about when they hear, well, nutrition can cure diseases, the connection that they forget is that you guys, ADD, ADHD, it's a brain chemical disorder, right? If your brain doesn't have the proper nutrients to make the right chemicals like serotonin and dopamine and things like that, you can't make those, and that could trigger a disease like ADD or ADHD. But if you feed your body the proper nutrients so that your body can produce those chemicals, so in a sense, again, I hate saying, hey, foods can cure diseases, but guess what? Foods convert into nutrients, and nutrients convert into the chemicals and hormones that your body needs to function. So yes, food can cure diseases if that's the cause of the disease.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back after the break, and we'll talk some more about treatment, both pharmacology and natural treatments. We'll be back right after the break.
Do you want peace in your family relationships instead of conflict? Do you want a safe, loving marriage instead of one that is failing? Are you troubled about what's happening with your children and need help for them? At Legacy Changers Counseling Centers, the goal is to strengthen individuals and families with cutting-edge emotional and mental health interventions. The exceptionally trained counselors at Legacy provide the specialized guidance you need in a safe environment of belonging so that you can make the life changes you and your loved ones need. Get real help for your emotional and relationship needs. Call today at 404-334-7575. That's 404-334-7575. You can also find us on the web at legacychangerscounseling.com. Call now and transform your life today. 404-334-7575 or legacychangerscounseling.com.
So we left talking about sleep, kind of, you know, you pointed to that, and Juan, during the break you started talking about sleep.
Right. I was basically saying that we seem to forget that children, with the way technology is nowadays, they spend tremendous amount of hours on, cell phones, tablets, and I'm sure that affects their sleep pattern. Not only does it not keep them inactive, it basically keeps their attention, even though it's there on that object, it's still not being expelled from them, so to speak, because even though they're active, they're again inactive with movement, with getting out and actually burning that energy.
Yeah.
So we have to think about how technology is also affecting, people with ADHD.
And I coach my parents, no electronics at least 2 hours before bed, but so that their brain has time to mellow out. And I substitute that with reading a story to your child. I mean, a lot of some people don't do that anymore.
I know.
Right.
Read a story to
know.
your child. There was
I
one principal who started reading to on social media to children who didn't have parents that could read to them before bed.
Yeah.
In her pajamas.
Oh, wow.
Courageous, right?
And you'd be surprised how engaging that is, and how much that just builds relationship. Aside from the fact that it helps their brain settle down and helps them settle down, it also just builds relationship when you're reading to your child every night.
And that's part of the challenge is with all the electronic stimuli and media, they're also having a decrease in true social relationships.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I get a lot of them not only with that, but they may have a social issue and how to relate to other people because they're so stuck in their electronics.
Yeah.
The other thing is before sleep, so you can also use essential oils like chamomile, helps you sleep. Sound machines for kids who need that. And the flip side of the electronics as well is the boredom tolerance. So a lot of kids who truly may or may not have ADHD, is their boredom. And so parents use the electronic medium to substitute to help them keep stable, but that doesn't teach them how to be bored sometimes. And a lot of kids with ADHD, when they feel bored, they start getting into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Gibbs, you're trying to get in here. Dr. Gibbs, were you trying to get in?
Yeah. No, I'm 100% agreeing with everything, y'all are saying. I'm so on board with that. I tried to implement a rule in my home. I have 8 children. We're a combined family. I came with 3, she came with 4, and then we had one together. And most of them are teenagers or older now in their early 20s. And we tried to implement a rule in our home where there's just no electronics after 10 p.m., including for adults, again, because you flip open that laptop and the lights from that screen cause you a melatonin deficiency in your body. And so once you open that up after 10 p.m., you aren't going to sleep very well. And so we try to do it not just as a married couple, but with our children as well. And, when you got teenagers, they like rebelling. And not all of them were on board with that program, but the ones who did do it, we saw a easily recognizable difference in their attitude and how rested they were in the morning, their schoolwork. I mean, it was incredible just what that one simple rule did for the kids who decided to follow it. Put your cell phone away, put the laptop away, turn off the TV at 10 p.m. It's time to wind your mind down,
And that's a residual effect for the parents too, because they also get restful sleep and now have a little bit more patience for their kids, but the kids are not as irritable, quote unquote, to them in the first place.
My wife and I's relationship tremendously because, you're still not really tired at 10 p.m. We weren't, so we would sit and talk for an hour or so before we fell.
Oh, we lost him. We'll try to get him back. So those are fantastic ways. One of the things though that popped into my head as Dr. Gibbs was talking about nutrition and how that can impact development and poor nutrition being at the root of some disease. In my mind, I think that may be true, but then I think about the quality of food that may be available to people. Right? Even if people don't, excuse me. Even if people don't use a lot of processed foods and do try to buy fruits and vegetables and eat that as much as they can, I just have heard so many barriers just around, one, the quality of the food.
Chemically
laced. And also just how expensive it is, depending on where you live and how easy it is for you to get or not get, just depending on where you are in the country. And those can be real barriers to people. Those can be real barriers.
It is, you know, and unfortunately, certain neighborhoods don't have the Whole Foods and the Sprouts. And some people will argue and say that these places like that are super expensive, but really it's not. Like, I did a comparative shop for myself just so I could see. And I typically shop at Whole Foods or Sprouts because I like to go get my water. It's 35 cents a gallon versus $1.20 or whatever, $2 to $3 a gallon. So I just bring my gallons that I've used and fill up with alkaline water for 35 cents.
Yeah.
Right? And then I started looking at the organic spring mix versus one place to the next. And I found they were almost the same price. Now, again, if you're in certain communities and you have to take a bus and train to get to these places, it may make it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
But I just feel like, you know, something has to give in order for the nutrition to be there because, yes, sleep is very important, but nutrition is equally as important to help stimulate the children. Yeah. I mean, little kids getting up and don't have breakfast. You know, I'm not a breakfast person. My breakfast is coffee. I'm good to go. And I normally eat around 3, 4 o'clock. And that's my breakfast.
So unhealthy.
But it's not, you know, because I actually watched this program on, it was this doctor. And she said what most people think breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which it is. But what is your breakfast? Yeah. I can't eat first thing in the morning, right? So for me to eat later on in the afternoon, that's good for me. That's my breakfast. I'm breaking my fast.
I actually heard something different, similar and different. What I heard or was reading recently was that between 4 a.m. and 12 noon is when your body is really doing its most getting out waste, whatever that is. And they said that most people stop that process when they eat a big breakfast right in the middle of that time period. And he said they eat breakfast and then they have fruit afterward. And then their glucose levels shoot up. And he said really what is the most healthy thing is to have your fruit on an empty stomach in the morning. And it immediately, all the nutrients that you need from the fruit are easily digested. And in doing that, you also don't stop that process of waste elimination that your body is going through from 4 a.m. to 12 noon. And then at 12 noon, and between 12 noon and 8 p.m. is when you should be eating your meals of protein, vegetables, things like that. That will, that's the last thing I was reading. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, I mean, I really feel like it's for each person, but when you have a little kid who is getting up and going to, so like, I couldn't believe, I remember my daughters having to be up and out of the house by 6:30 at one point, and I was like, who does that? Like, that's not normal, right? So, in order to give them something,
sure.
You know, whether it was a bag of grapes and some cheese, and of course, I give my kids little cups of coffee on the way out the door, right? That's probably not a good thing, but it was good, you know.
Well, what will a cup of coffee do for a kid that maybe has?
It wasn't a big cup like I used to get. It was a little one.
Actually, I've done some reading that says that it can help kids
really
with ADHD.
Tell us.
Their brain is structured a little differently. But, you know, it...
You just
depends on y'all.
Yes.
Oh man, absolutely. All right, so
Dr. Fountain, I have a quick question. Is there a difference between ADD and ADHD?
So it's very simple. The ADD just means that their hyperactivity is not predominant. So it's the focus on the inattentive type.
Okay. Now, can an individual grow out of either one, or is it something that's, you know, with them for life?
If you can figure out that question, bro, you'll make a lot of people some money. So I think you can learn how to function with it better. If you aren't able to, but you can definitely learn how to function with it. It's a huge piece is awareness and learning how to at least recognize, you know, what this may be some symptoms. These may be some symptoms that are too overwhelming for me to handle on my own right now. Right. A lot of people are very avoidant to do that.
Okay.
Well, not a lot. Some people.
Can you have a late onset of like ADD or ADHD?
Well, to be diagnosed is technically supposed to be before 12 with children. But as I said earlier, a lot of adults who legitimately can verify I have all these symptoms, aren't diagnosed until later.
I think
a
I
lot
got
of
mine
teens,
in grad school.
Well,
I think you got yours in grad school.
I do, because like I could sit down for hours before and read books, and like I could do things for longer period of time. Now, no, you might get a full hour out of me.
Is that burnout?
Is that what that is?
Well, I think it could be
stress.
a combination. It could be developmental. Also, just knowing about grad school. Grad school is tough on your brain, and your body. A lot of times, it can transition into physical. Like I know my PhD. I was like, I'm glad I'm still alive with all
The PhD will get you full blown PTSD.
For me, it was physical manifestations. I
am a
had high
product.
cholesterol, and so
So stress. High levels of stress can have different effects, obviously, and it probably can have effects that look like ADHD development, but may not be really full-blown ADHD or diagnosable.
So you're going to get you an evaluation?
I am. I'm thinking
Look
about
at
it because I'm like, I was never like this, and then all of a sudden now I'm like, bing, 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 bing. I'm a little Dory. I'm not full-blown Dory just yet.
Tell us about Dory. We're talking about Finding Nemo.
And I actually have a little tent in my play therapy room and the whole setup. It has the pictures and the pillows and everything. But it ultimately, Dory has a memory.
Before you do Dory, I forgot. We need to take a break. Let's take a quick break,
Oh.
and we'll be right back, and then we'll do Dory. Welcome back to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. And before we left, Dr. Fountain was going to tell us about Nemo. And Dr. Gibbs, we're glad you're back on the air because I actually want to pull you back in after the Nemo story to talk to us a little bit just more about nutrition, because while you were gone, we talked some just about our thoughts around the quality of food that's out there right now, and the conversation that you started around nutrition being such a key thing. But let's hear about Nemo first, because I'm really interested.
Well, in Finding Nemo and then Finding Dory, actually she had a short-term memory loss, but besides that, she had some symptoms that were similar to ADHD. And so, like,
y'all realize we're talking about a fish, right?
We are. That is amazing. But you know what? Cartoons are that's that playful aspect that stimulates kids' attention to see, you know what, there's someone who has some of these similar challenges, and they still can be productive. They still can have helpful relationships. And so that's kind of the, hope that can come with it. But anyway. So with Dory, if you were familiar with the movie, sometimes she'll just dart off. Like, I don't know.
Like,
what is this? Ooh, wow. So
we would have to pull her back, and she would be like, oh, but wait a minute. So where are we going? What are we doing? Who are you? To the what? And then she'd be like, oh, wait a minute. There's a little jellyfish. Let's go jellyfish. It's like, I love her.
You love her, yeah. And to the parent, to Nemo's dad, he's like pissed. Like, if this girl, why can't she follow my directions? Why can't she just follow us?
See, y'all making me feel like I got a little bit of some symptoms of ADHD now.
Yeah. Well, you advocated to go get your evaluation.
Yeah, I think I need to go get evaluated.
But if you, in the Finding Dory movie though, the mom is so patient. She actually rhythmic activities really help with the lower stem brain development. And so if you can remember, even the patterns like the stones she put out to lay home, going over those songs and having to remember simple phrases over and over and over to help her remember, steps to how to get home, and of course he eventually gets home. But the song rhythmic can help with that lower stem development, but that's more short-term memory. But yes, patience, lots of empathy.
And lots of education and training so parents can develop that type of skill of patience and empathy. And especially in today's world where everything is just so rushed and chaotic, it's just hard for parents to slow down and pace.
And yes, and great modeling for their kids, especially if the parent has ADHD.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things, like even we do a lot of parenting sessions just to help the parents learn how to not overreact, how to remain calm, how to recognize what the symptoms are, and effective ways to help their kids manage it. For parental stress,
Yes.
they're just as stressed a lot of times.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Gibbs, any thoughts on that before we jump back to nutrition?
No, again, I totally agree. You guys are right on spot. It really is about recognition. It's about empathy, care, and concern, and getting the right help. And it may take seeing 3 or 4 different professionals before your gut feeling tells you that this is the right thing.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in gut feeling, especially when it comes to parents and their children. Usually what you feel is right is typically the best approach. If you feel skeptical, if you've got, hesitations about a treatment program or something, then definitely seek other options until you've educated yourself and you get a good feeling about moving forward with something. Parents' intuition is a real thing.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because parents do need to be empowered to know that they have the right to question and to select and to evaluate, and not just accept the first person that they come across in their insurance plan. And sometimes that's fear. Sometimes parents really just don't know, and they are so desperate for help that they will grab onto the first person that sounds like maybe they know a little bit more than I do and can be helpful, right? And because there's nothing like being scared for your kid and not knowing what to do, right? But it is a good admonition to tell parents that even when you are desperate, even when you're at the point where you just don't know what to do, still investigate, inquire, and follow your gut, and don't necessarily just grab onto the first provider that comes your way. So just in terms of nutrition, I do really want to go back to that. And what we talked about was, along the premise of nutrition being so helpful for mediating some of the symptomology that we see and moving people towards health with good nutrition. What do we do in the face of food that may not be of high quality, that is laced with chemicals just from how they're grown? In certain areas, some of the quality of food is just poor. So what do you do with that, Dr. Gibbs?
Yeah, that really does all boil down to education as well. I've heard this time and time again from people saying that, well, I can't afford to buy healthy food, and it's such a misconception. In fact, did you know shopping at the farmer's market is so much less expensive than shopping at the grocery store? It really is. Farmers are always willing and able to barter and negotiate, and it's like being in Mexico where you kind of haggle over prices lots of times at the farmer market, and you can save so much money. And when you go to those farmers markets, and by the way, they are even in metropolitan areas. I don't care what city you live in, Detroit, Cincinnati, all you have to do is Google farmers market in my area, and you will find them, because there are people that have neighborhoods where they grow crops together in unused parking lots or unused building lots, and then they bring that produce to a farmer's market. Or even farmers, now they're finding that, hey, if I bring my produce that I grow to the city, I'm going to get better pricing direct to the consumer than if I sell bulk wholesale to grocery store chains and sell it as.
Well, I'll add on to that until they come back. I think it's also reciprocal because when you help, there it goes.
Usually, the more expensive it is, and the worse it is for you.
Yes.
Usually, the more expensive it is, the worse it is for you.
Well, the other thing is it can be reciprocal. Mm-hmm. So you're helping the local farmers who are trying to, grow their crops without the chemicals. Yeah. And it's a matter of priority. I mean, are you going to spend all your money on cheap food now and then have all these expensive health ailments later? Mm-hmm. Or are you going to invest in your food now? And there's creative ways to share to do that and then have less, medical bills later.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, and that is another way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of supplements, what are some types of supplements that folks can use that can also be helpful in making sure that...
That's another area where you really have to educate yourself because, again, being a dietary supplement formulator and in this industry for so long, I've seen so many charlatan companies come and go. I mean, there's quacks in every field, just like you read on the news sometime about quack doctors. Well, there's quack dietary supplements too. But it's not all quackery. In fact, if you go to clinicaltrials.gov or the NIH website or PubMed, there are literally thousands of clinical studies, full-on, like double-blind, gold standard clinical studies on the use of certain herbs for specific diseases. I've got one here because this topic was ADD. I just did a quick search on NIH.org, the National Institutes of Health, and I found a double-blind randomized placebo clinical study on the use of VASAYO, which is actually one of the ingredients that we use at VASAYO with our product called Neuro. We have a product that we offer VASAYO called Neuro, and one of the key ingredients in there is VASAYO, where they actually did this randomized double-blind placebo clinical study on ADD and showed that it reduced symptoms of ADD, so it increased focus, it reduced the anxiety, which you find in people with ADHD. And it's because VASAYO doesn't work as a stimulant like other ADD medications do. It actually helped them feel more calm because it boosted dopamine levels and also enhanced communication between the neurons by increasing the growth of the nerve ending called the dendrites. Those are like your tiny microcomputers in your brain, and that's why it helps mental clarity. So here's not a prescription drug, but an herb that if used at the right dose, like they did in this clinical study, can actually alleviate the symptoms of ADHD and ADD, and it's clinically proven. So, science is catching up to the use of herbs. And what I mean by that is, the use of herbs have been out there for a long time, hundreds of years in some cultures, thousands of years in other cultures. But science is finally starting to do these clinical studies on them and recognize that, hey, there are benefits here. There are alternatives to prescription drugs,
So then how do people know? How do people, and I understand you're saying you can Google it, but there, as you said, there's thousands of research studies out there. And so how do people know how to get those types of natural remedies?
There are many reputable companies out there. I mean, if there's, for example, take VASAYO, for example. Again, yes, I may sound biased because that's the company I work at right now, but I chose to work there. I could have chosen to work at other places, but I chose to work at VASAYO because they're a reputable company. We use ingredients that have been clinically proven. So I would say look for companies that are, large, the $100 million plus range, things like that, because they are scrutinized by the FDA. They have to follow FTC laws. They can't lie on their labels. The things you buy off of Amazon.com in the nutrition section, it could be made in somebody's garage. I mean, you don't know anything about these companies. Anybody in their neighbor can get a product on Amazon.com. But if you look at the company that's behind the label, and they're large and they're reputable, you're probably going to find a product that will work better than just something you pull off of the internet and order online. And again, I know that's broad, but it's a start. Mm-hmm. Look at the ingredients, and that's where you let your fingers do the walking. Get on Google and go to reputable websites, because again, there's a lot of crap on the internet, but the NIH is not going to post something that's not true. PubMed isn't going to post something that wasn't clinically proven. Clinicaltrials.gov is a website you can go to see the different clinical studies, and all you have to do, for example, people say, well, ginkgo helps with cognitive function. Ginkgo biloba, it was a big buzzword 10 years ago. And type in on PubMed ginkgo biloba and see what studies are out there, the pros and cons of using it. Mm-hmm. If it were me and I had this issue, or if one of my children had this issue, it's a no-brainer to spend 30 minutes or an hour researching something that might help. Sure. You have an obligation as a parent to do that, I believe. Don't go to, mamasherbs.com or something. Go to a website like PubMed or the NIH website.
I went to mamasherb.com and I found some really good information.
And while you're doing all that research, throw you some walnuts in your mouth.
I truly hope there's not a website out there called Mama.
It will be now.
Oh, man. So you do represent VASAYO. So tell us some more about Neuro and about the products that VASAYO has that are supplements and can be helpful for ADHD.
Well, yeah, Neuro is actually one of my favorite products at VASAYO, and that's simply because when I formulated that, it was a formula that was close to my heart. My own son was hit by a car at age 14 and suffered a very severe traumatic brain injury. In fact, I was told for days that he would most likely not live, and when I was told that he might live, but he'd be a vegetable his whole life, and they want to put a feeding tube in because he's going to need to start having nutrients. As soon as they got that feeding tube in him, I started pumping him full of everything that I could study about cognitive enhancers and rebuilding new neural pathways, and things like that. And so I started pumping him full of herbs like acetylcholine and bacoba and vinpocetine, high doses of DHA and EPA fish oil. In fact, I was giving him like 6 grams a day through his feeding tube. And again, this is something that the hospital eventually meaning I did it in secret for like the first 3 days. When I walk out, I'd start pumping stuff in his tube. But I eventually got caught and was able to get it cleared with the pharmacist at the hospital because they believed that my son was a lost case. They thought, whatever you want to do, go ahead because there's nothing more we can do at this point, is what they were saying. Well, 2.5 months later, or 2 months later, my son walked out of that hospital, and today you wouldn't even know that he had a traumatic brain injury if you didn't know him previously. There's some little quirky things about him, but it could just be a quirky, normal individual for what most people know about him, and I used those ingredients when I formulated Neuro. Because I had that experience several years ago, I knew the power of some of the ingredients that I was putting into this product. And if you get onto the VASAYO website and look at the product Neuro and the ingredients, you'll see that, and Google those ingredients. Every single one of those ingredients you can find on PubMed, on the NIH website, on clinicaltrials.gov, and they're all clinically proven ingredients. And where my background comes into play is how do I combine these ingredients in what doses for the best effect? And that's what I put into Neuro. We have a unique delivery system for Neuro in the fact that we've got a liposomal ginkgo biloba in there, so it gets delivered directly to the cells. I believe it's an amazing product. I've seen it help hundreds of people. We get testimonies into our corporate offices, on our corporate webpage, on my Facebook page. People send me, thank you notices for issues that they've been having in their family, whether it was traumatic brain injuries, whether it was ADD, whether it was bipolar. And I'm not saying that it's a panacea cure-all for every brain disease out there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there have been many people that have received help from this product. And I think it's a great start. If you've got someone in your family that has a neurological disorder like ADD or ADHD, do the research. Look at the options. It doesn't hurt to try a dietary supplement that's getting great reviews. I mean, what can it hurt? Okay, so you're out $40 or $50. You're going to spend more than that on a prescription drug over time, especially when it comes to the side effects of some of these medications that they use for ADD. The depression that can happen because of that, the liver and kidney disorders that happen after long-term use of it. I mean, dietary supplements to me, and nutrition, so your food and then your supplements, should be your front line, choices, your first choices for treating these conditions. Medication should be the last resort after you've tried everything and failed.
Yeah, and so for folks who are already on medication that's been prescribed, certainly talking with your doctor about nutritional supplements that you want to add, and working in combination with your doctor is advised, so that they can also help you monitor the impacts. If you're working with a mental health,
100% agree.
Yeah, so if you're working also with a mental health clinician, make sure you tell them that this is what you're also adding to what you're, and so we're certainly not saying just stop your medication cold. Now, I have heard people say that they've done that and then moved to nutritional supplements, and whatever outcome they got, that's great. But then I've also heard of people who have added nutritional supplements, and in conjunction with advice from their doctor and therapist, and maybe weaned off and kind of looked at the impact over time, and have had wonderful results, and eventually either have reduced dosages of psychopharmacology, psychopharm meds, or have eliminated it, depending on the severity. And so there's so many factors that come into play. And so be a wise consumer, as Dr. Gibbs is discussing, and do your research. Look for your natural supplements. Connect with your physicians, things like that. Are there other products as well that have been helpful in addition to the neuro?
That's one of our main products for cognitive function. But of course, as I mentioned earlier on in the program, everybody should be getting proper nutrients from their food. And if you just aren't willing to do that, or can't do that, or no matter what you do, you can't get your kid to eat the vegetables, we do have a food base. It is a whole food multivitamin, and that could be, I guess, an alternative to eating your 5 servings of vegetables every day. My wife blends these nutrients. The product is called Core Complete. She blends it into a smoothie that she makes, 3 or 4 times a week for the kids, because they don't like swallowing capsules that much. So she just breaks open the capsules and puts them into a smoothie with some berries and other things to make it taste good. And the kids love it. They actually love their smoothie, and I love the way they feel on the days that they take it. So if you're struggling to get proper nutrients into your kids' diet, then the Core Complete might be an option for you. And I'm not going to brag about the Core, but I am going to tell you that for what it is supremely inexpensive. I mean, think about if you could get a month's supply of all the proper nutrients into your child's diet for an entire month for $60. People spend $300-400 a week on groceries, and which is important, and you need to do that. And again, your first line should always be trying to get your kid to eat the right vegetables from the farmer's market in Mesa. You know, especially with ADHD kids and ADHD children, sometimes they just won't do what you ask them to do, right? It's not sometimes, it's probably more often than not. And if they just won't eat those vegetables, yeah, pour these capsules into a smoothie. I don't know any kid out there that doesn't like smoothies, you know? So put them into a smoothie, have them eat that for breakfast, and you've got a really inexpensive, super nutrient-dense packed drink that they can have every morning before school.
You know, as you say that, I think of friends of mine who hate vegetables, period, and don't eat vegetables at all. Yeah, and so this is helpful not just for children, but for adults who just don't really, you know, for whatever reason. And if you didn't grow up eating vegetables, then as an adult, it's not part of your habit, and then you have to acquire that habit. You know, it just takes time. I had to acquire the habit. I didn't grow up eating a lot of vegetables. No, I sure didn't. And so I had to acquire that habit. And now it's fine. Now I don't have any issues with it. But then again, the amount that you're supposed to eat during the course of a day as well.
I'm still struggling.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
I'm totally not eating healthy. So yeah, my whole body system was screwed up from beginning.
And you are not alone. You are not alone. So my brother would hate to hear me say that, but because he's naturopathic, he is full plate, huge plate full of veggies for every meal, that type of guy. And, you know, I'm just not. I don't know how he did that. And it didn't happen to me. It just didn't transmit for some reason. All right, so that's just helpful. So now, you know, we've kind of, my engineer has said we need to take a break. So we are taking a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to wrap up the show, and we'll just kind of highlight some of the main points that we want to make sure folks take away from the show. And then we'll be done. So just hang on with us. Dr. Gibbs, do you have to go, or can you hang on for a minute?
All right.
Okay, we'll be back in a minute.
Do you want peace in your family relationships instead of conflict? Do you want a safe, loving marriage instead of one that is failing? Are you troubled about what's happening with your children and need help for them? At Legacy Changers Counseling Centers, the goal is to strengthen individuals and families with cutting-edge emotional and mental health interventions. The exceptionally trained counselors at Legacy provide the specialized guidance you need in a safe environment of belonging so that you can make the life changes you and your loved ones need. Get real help for your emotional and relationship needs. Call today at 404-334-7575. That's 404-334-7575. You can also find us on the web at legacychangerscounseling.com. Call now and transform your life today. 404-334-7575 or legacychangerscounseling.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. As we wind up, we just want to just highlight just the final things that we want folks to really remember as, you know, that you can take away from the show. Because we've talked about a whole lot of things. My number one thing that I'm going to remember is Finding Nemo. I'm going to go watch the movie.
You're going to love it.
Finding Dory.
And Finding Dory. Okay, I'm going to go watch those two movies. My children are 25 and 27, so it's been a minute since I've seen Nemo. I don't remember it at all. So that's going to be my number one takeaway. So Dr. Fountain, if you could point to 2 or 3 things that you just want folks to make sure they remember, what would they be?
For parents, pay attention to your child's physiological needs. So the sleep, the eating, nutrition, hydration, physical activity, and playfulness. The second thing would be an advocate for your child and help build their self-worth in the school system and at home. I'm huge on how you speak to your child. Separate their person from their behaviors. So, you know, they may have impulsive behaviors, but they're not impulsive. You know, they even if they're distracted, we can reframe it as multitasking. If they're hyperactive, they have a lot of energy and burn calories. If they're strong-willed, they're perseverance. You know? So finding small ways to reframe. And then the third thing is charged batteries for the parents. Even if, you know, if you get your child somewhere, you come on in too to help you with as you're going through the developmental periods, not just for your children, but also yourself as a parent and or adult. So
So don't drop your kid off and tell the therapist to fix them. is what you're saying.
No. You play a huge part in that process. Yeah, because remember, families tend to get in these homeostasis cycles. And so parents are somewhat playing a role in this cycle too. So it's about helping change the dynamics of the relationships within the family system.
Absolutely. And Dr. Gibbs, from your perspective, what are 2 or 3 things that you really want folks to take away? If they don't remember anything else that we talked about, what do you think are the 2 or 3 most important?
Man, that's actually a hard one. This whole program has been great. Educate yourself. If more than anything, I think that's the problem we're lacking in society. We're so caught up in our work, in our jobs, in our own lives, that it's hard to sometimes take a step back and say, you know what, my child or my sibling or even yourself, is suffering from an issue. You got to educate yourself about that issue. Just don't rely on the first, psychiatrist you go see. Get a second opinion. Read online about it. Take the time to invest in yourself and in your children so that you can get the proper outcome that you're desiring. Because if you don't put any time in it, you're not going to get the desired outcome.
Absolutely. And I think, too, just to reiterate, it's just really important if you are feeling as though we're recognizing that some of the things that we talked about are a part of what you're experiencing and have experienced for a long time. Just investigate. Maybe this is a wake-up call for you to be able to gain more insight and awareness around your functioning, and potentially improve your functioning in ways that you didn't really think were possible before hearing some of this information. And so my hope is that as folks are listening, not only will you do that for yourself, but you will also, for friends and family that maybe you recognize some of these things in them, get them this information so that they can begin to be more aware as well, and potentially look for resources that can be helpful. There are resources for everything that we're experiencing. It's just a matter of understanding how to find them, and knowing that those resources are out there, and then making the time to take care of yourself. Self-care is such an important part of just our overall ability to maintain longevity and do the things in life that we are meant to do, in terms of whether it's parenting right now in this season or something that you're doing in your work, whatever it may be. Being able to contribute to your longevity by investigating and getting information and seeking help, even for the littlest things, to contribute to and promote your own wellness is really important. And so hopefully the show has been helpful for folks who've been listening. Dr. Yolanda Fountain, again, tell everybody the name of your practice and where you're located.
Play Wellness in Roswell, Georgia.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. And Dr.
Having
Gibbs, thank you so much for joining us as well. You are the Chief Scientific Advisor for VASAYO, and thank you for the work you're doing there, and for the formulations that you are continuing to build.
Hey, thank you for having me on the show. It was my pleasure, and it was a great show. I learned a lot.
Awesome. I learned a lot too. All right, everybody. See you next Tuesday, same time, same place. Have a wonderful week. Thanks for joining us on the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show.